Director of the DCEU Flash movie, Andy Muschietti, which I prefer to call him Andy Muschietti because I think it's a lot cooler. He was recently in the news, at least online, because he was in a podcast where he talked a little bit about why he thought that The Flash failed. And essentially, he broke it down to just because people don't like the character. People don't like The Flash. There were other reasons they talked about, so I do want to talk about those as well. I think some people have misrepresented his quote as only being that, but I wanted to look at this for a couple minutes because this literally proves exactly what I've said time and time again. When we don't support these movies, and I'm not even saying you should have, when we don't support these movies or books or whatever, it seems like these creators or executives or studio heads or even directors at this point, they don't really seem to actually understand why we don't. With many reasons contributing to the failure, including obviously Ezra Miller's behavior. So we're going to take a look at this today, but it's just really sad to see a comment like this from a professional. It's such a tone-deaf answer to why this didn't land. It had a budget of something like 220 million, I think, which is a lot. By the end of its theatrical run, I believe it made close to 240 million. You might think, wow, they made 20 million bucks, but a lot of times budget does not include the actual full-on budget for marketing and other stuff, which was very heavy for this. So anyways, we'll take a look at this today for a few minutes. If you enjoyed the video, you want to leave a like, subscribe, let me know what you're thinking in the comments down below. I do have a question of the day for you, which is, what did you think of the Flash movie? And if you didn't bother to see it, why didn't you? There's a lot of valid reasons why people didn't watch it. Also, if you're a big superhero fan, I have a lot of superhero videos on this channel, and I've been playing through some superhero and other types of games over on Degenerate Plays, my Let's Play channel. The link to that is in the description down below, so I hope to see you over there. Hang out podcast style, have fun playing some games with me and my friends. We have conversations about a lot of stuff, so always a fun time. Now, this quote was originally in Spanish, like I believe I said earlier. The translated quote is on Twitter, which says, "The Flash failed apart from all the other reasons, like Ezra Miller, superhero fatigue," which I would argue is not really a thing, as much as people make it out to be, because it wasn't a movie that appealed to the 4 quadrants. It failed at that. When you spend $200 million making a movie, Warner wants to bring even your grandmother to the theaters. And I found out in private conversations that a lot of people just don't care about the Flash as a character, particularly the 2 female quadrants. All that is wind going against the movie that I learned about. First off, part of this can be true. Part of this can be a true statement. Like, for example, I actually do buy that there are a lot of people who don't care about specific comic book characters or specific superheroes that haven't necessarily transcended comic books into other media, but they've messed up with the Flash several times before. Like, for example, when the Flash was going to get a video game that was going to help him transcend the media of comics and animation, and it never materialized. Or, for example, when Flash was going to have this movie, The Flash, come out years ago, like near the beginning of the DCEU. This film was stuck in development hell for many, many years. It went through many rewrites. In fact, one of the upcoming Rejected Medias I'd love to do, where we take a look at, what could have been with media and stuff, is looking at the original scripts for The Flash and the leaks around that, because there was a lot and it was very, very different at the time. Now, keep in mind, this was during a time when the DCEU was also kind of falling apart. Whether you were the biggest Zack Snyder fan of all time, and I liked a lot of his earlier movies, to be completely honest with you, or you didn't like that style at all for the DCEU, and you were more of a fan kind of in the middle when it was getting a little more Marvel-y, a little lighter, and trying to appeal a little bit more to the general audience. No matter where you fell on this, everybody at this point in the DCEU was fatigued, not of superheroes, but of the DCEU itself. And you know why? Because it had been directionless for a very long time. This is a film universe that had kind of fallen off in terms of popularity for many reasons. First off, people weren't very happy. A lot of people were not happy with Batman v Superman. I liked it. I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but I really enjoy the movie. I like it a lot. Then you have a complete tonal shift and a 180 at Justice League, where they brought in, of course, Joss Whedon, and we know the story around that. Everything was changed. Personally, I really liked the Snyder cut of Justice League, but that's just me. I think it was a much more competent film, but that didn't get released for many, many years. And even then, Warner wanted to stand by the fact that the theatrical version was the canon one that they were going to follow, even though no one really liked it. It was just kind of like, at best, a fun mess of a film. And that's about it. There wasn't really a lot of substance to that Joss Whedon Justice League, which was supposed to be your Avengers, and you never even built to that. So you already had a film universe that people felt was rushed, kind of thrown hastily together. It had changed creative hands many times, and then you had a character who did in some ways fail to translate out of the, comic book realm because of the decisions around WB, but also that character had a very, very successful run on TV. That's one thing that I think we do need to remember. Like, yes, I think in some ways The Flash, they could have done a better job with The Flash, like in terms of as a character, getting him out of just comics and animation and into other mediums, doing this movie earlier and doing it right, having, the TV show not fall off after season 3 and really kind of go downhill with its quality to the point where Barry was just like a guy who couldn't do anything without being on a Bluetooth phone with his buddies back at Star Labs. Like, they just made the Flash an idiot at a certain point. But even after all of that, people still loved Grant Gustin. There were still calls at this point to recast the DCEU Flash with Grant Gustin's Flash because people at least thought he was a stand-up guy who did a good job and cared about the character. Even though the writing around him had kind of fallen on the show, people still liked him, and they liked that Flash. So to me, this already says that it's not just a example of, well, people didn't like the Flash. That's why it's so weird to me to see that being the takeaway for Andy here, that people don't care. Because it's also your job as a creator to make people care. Like, do you really think that the general audience gave two shits about who Ant-Man was when Ant-Man 1 came out? They didn't. You could be the biggest Ant-Man comic book fan of all time. You're clenching your fist and getting annoyed, and you're like, I can't believe they went with Scott. They should have done a Hank Pym movie. Ultron should have been related to Hank Pym, not Tony Stark. And the general audience, people who might be listening to this video, all of that just probably went over their head because they're like, I don't know or care about what any of you're talking about is. I just went to see the Marvel movie because it's fun. So you have to be able to appeal to both of these groups. That is unfortunately how movie making works. It is so expensive, you can't just target a tiny niche if you're going for a big budget film. Now, when it came to The Flash, they marketed this film as if they were targeting everybody, but again, a universe that had gone downhill, that a lot of people on every end of the spectrum of fandom had gotten tired of because they didn't see a good ending point for it, they didn't see a good progression to it, there was nothing natural about it, it was just very, ham-fisted, all these creator changes and stuff. You had a movie that many people who were in the know in terms of film news knew had been in development hell for many years. You have a character that outside of his TV show, they really hadn't tried to make a household name. Like, they hadn't tried to translate him to other types of media. They've been pretty lazy with people who aren't like Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman. That's just kind of how WB and DC have been. Lazy with characters that aren't those three. And then finally, you actually have the actions of Ezra Miller. Now, Ezra Miller, I think I am someone who, unless you're like an offending pedophile or a serial killer or rapist, I'm pretty forgiving with allowing second chances. And you know what? A lot of people will give second chances to those people too. Good on you. Do I think people can change? I sure hope so. But there's certain things you do that I'm going to have a very hard time ignoring. Now, with Ezra Miller, there were a lot of actions and accusations around this individual's actions, and to the point where I actually created Miller Watch as like kind of a joke, fun news update thing where it was like, what crazy antics is Ezra up to this week? What's Ezra gonna do now? Like, Ezra had a freak out about the Parcheesi game and pulled a gun on someone allegedly, or Ezra, choke slammed this fan allegedly, and all this crazy stuff, right? Like, we were kind of talking about it because it was just crazy. It was insane at the time. That's another thing that worked against The Flash. Now, the thing is, obviously Andy mentions that. Andy mentions Ezra Miller here. Andy mentions superhero fatigue. But the thing is, this was a perfect storm of bad things happening. All those things I talked about before with the film and around the universe and everything, but also around Ezra Miller. Your title lead is out there doing stuff that makes this person look insane, and a lot of people aren't going to want to go and support that. And you know how I know that? Because anytime anybody does anything, it's always going to come up. Even years later, you know, you have Mel Gibson talking about making more movies. I still see people bring up his drunk rant from like 10 or 15 years ago when he was like pulled over and I believe intoxicated and he just said some crazy stuff. I still see people bring that up. That was like 10 or 15 years ago. So of course, if it's in the news cycle right now all the time, you have your lead actor doing these things that are just nutty and making your studio look unprofessional, making your movie look unprofessional and stupid. That's not going to help you. One of the other reasons that I believe this movie failed is also just people knew that there was going to be a universe reset. So this movie didn't get a lot of positive reviews. This movie already was moving towards a reset. I don't think it did a good job of it. You know, maybe the things Flash did affected the timeline. Maybe that's what they're going with the DC universe right now. I don't really know, because as far as I can tell, Gunn is doing his projects were canon and most other things weren't. Like Suicide Squad, his version was canon. The Peacemaker season, except for one of the final scenes, was canon. Stuff that he did was, right? But he was brought in to essentially redo this universe. So you have this movie, which is one of the final ones in this timeline, and when people left the theaters from it, they didn't really have good things to say. And this was a timeline that a lot of people had gotten tired of. Now, personally, I wanted the DCEU to be fixed. I didn't really want it to just peter out and go away. I wanted it to get better, because it felt like it was such a commitment that this universe had been around for a decade, essentially. I thought, well, it sucks to throw this out. Most other people didn't even have that level of sentiment or attachment to it. They were just ready to be done. So all of these things together, I truly think kind of damned The Flash. They really did kind of push it into the ground. And I think to boil it down to like one sentence that mentions these other problems, but then a whole paragraph almost that talks about how women don't care about The Flash, I don't know. I just feel like it's such a bad take. Like it's such a bad way to look at it. It's so studio driven. It's really this idea of like people could boycott your film. They could say, I think the lead actor is crazy and a bad person. I think this movie being stuck in development hell for years and years is bad. I think your universe is directionless. I think that you're going to reboot it anyway. I think that going to the movies is expensive and there's other stuff out I'd rather see. You know, it's like you have all of these things and you walk away with people not like Flash. People think boring hero. It just feels like a caveman response to something that's much more complex than that. And I think it's too bad because this is also someone who's supposedly in charge of the next upcoming Batman movie for the DC universe, if and when that happens. And it just kind of has me sitting here scratching my head like, if you don't understand what happened here, it's hard for me to expect you to go on to be able to do good work. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. I think this is all very silly, but if you want to support this channel, we have a Fortnite code. It's DJAY123. We also do, of course, have our other channels. Those are in the description. Like I mentioned, our podcast style Let's Play channel. That's over there too. We have a lot of conversations like this with me and my friends. And finally, we have our own store, CosmoBunny.shop. You can use code DJAY123 for 10% off your transformative resin coaster. These are keychains, coasters, trays, and all kinds of other stuff here. And what we do is we take comics, manga, magazines, etc. that are damaged. We take them from local bookstores around here that are either giving them away or are borderline giving them away dirt cheap because they're damaged. Keep those things out of landfills, make something new and transformative out of it, and then we recycle the rest. So I hope you have a fantastic day. And if people don't watch this video, it's because people don't use YouTube anymore. I don't know. I just wanted to come up with some kind of crazy reasoning for it. So anyways, as always, everybody, stay shway.